Hello, Internet. Today we'll be talking about a subject that I know a fair amount. The topic is how sound can influence the body. So, with every frequency, the body will has some part of it that it will resonate at, or just about. But there's also frequencies that tend to resonate with us more. Um, in the past, in ancient times, we would call these sacred numbers, sacred spaces. And where this kind of leads us in today is how modern soundscapes in television, broadcast, video games, and movies can affect us so greatly and so impactfully that we as a society should know about this. It should not be confined to the back rooms and just being knowledge that isn't present in society. So today we're going to share that with you. So, with every frequency, I'm going to use the front of this book as a guide, but with every frequency on the body, there is a corresponding spot that you can have. Um, this would be acupuncture or the meridians of the body. So let me quickly define what a meridian of the body is. So you have your lungs, they're attached to your thumb. And so when you breathe in and out, the part that's most affected by that is going to be the lung meridian. You're not going to have a vibration on a different one, except you do because the lungs always move the entire body. The spleen is one of those organs that gets forgotten about, the pinky. So when your pinky moves, I've kind of gone off track here. So your body has all these points that can vibrate at different frequencies, and there's some big ones in the body that really resonate. That's what I was going on about previously with the lungs and the spleen. You also have the chakra meridians where energy just tends to move. So with every chakra, you have the serpent that rises up that goes around the body, and with that, you can use those pathways as conduit for energy to flow, and also fluids and ions and all sorts of this bodily fluid. And an instance where we can see that the body isn't performing to the best of it is muscle tightness. So when you have a muscle that's stiff, it doesn't allow fluids and ions and electricity to flow through it in a proper manner. And this can cause just about, well, this can cause a lot of different things to happen. The most common of which is anxiety and depression in my case. Um, the more I stretch, the better I feel, and the more mobility I have, the easier it is for me to govern the processes of my body, to keep myself in balance. Because ultimately, what the sages of the world are, and the Buddhist monks, and the men of the Knights Templar were trying to do was they were trying to balance all of these chakras so that they can flow up and catch the divine wind, or as we're quickly going to learn, is magnetic fields. So we have, with every single object in the world, you have a magnetic field that flows through it. And each of these objects, each of these forms, is going to interact with it in a different way. So if you stick a piece of steel or iron in a continuous magnetic field, over time it will develop an opposite charge to that and therefore become a magnet to other things. And you can also increase this by having an alternating magnetic field and having it be pulled through it to generate eddy currents within inside it. So one of the things that steel is very good at is conducting magnetic fields and electric fields. Steel is very conductive in global terms. But what steel does is it creates these tiny little eddy currents inside of it, and that's what allows it to become so magnetic so quickly. But when we say look at a material like quartz, when we apply an electric field to quartz, it starts oscillating at a given frequency, and that frequency is governed by the size of it and by the components you put around it. So in modern computers, a quartz crystal will be governing about nearly all of your modern electronics. There's very little circuits that are using resistor capacitive networks or inductive networks. Almost all of these are quartz based things, and we know quartz is very stable at this because of how precise we can cut it. And so that's the quartz crystal is powering the modern world in a sense. It's keeping its time. That taken from quartz, when you also look at the esoteric side of it, when you look at it in that light, what you see is quartz is a very energizing crystal. It amplifies things. So when you put in energy towards a quartz crystal, what you get out is more than you got in. And you also have the purifying aspect of quartz, because the esoteric quartz is on a larger scale. What we see is that when we put in energy to it, it's very stable at any given frequency, but tends to be higher frequencies, because when you have something grow, you have a longer time span where it goes across, because with any given material the propagation speed is going to change. But if you have something that's smaller, it's going to oscillate faster, and that's just the principle of time. So when we have these relationships with time and distance, we get frequencies out, because, well, when you go time and distance with the conventional formula, you have one distance, but with a frequency we end up repeating that over and over again. So we can think of that as a modulus, or as a magic number that repeats itself. There are countless numbers of these numbers that just go around in circles with themselves. And in math, we can study them, like for instance, how the binary world of computers is. You have 8 bits, and then you can stack more on top of that. And that could be a modulus in itself. There's better moduluses like the Fibonacci sequence, where you take the golden ratio, which is a ratio that you can derive the circle from based on a square. And when you have that set of frequencies, or when you have that set of numbers and you play that as a frequency set, all of a sudden we bring the whole thing back around to medicine. Because when you play that frequency set in a room with people in it, what happens is you end up energizing all of these different spots. You essentially have a bulldozer that goes like this, that clears those passages. It opens them up. Because when you have something that has been still, it's stagnant. The ions don't flow. The fluid doesn't flow. But when you have something that now is moving back and forth, um, I wish I had the example of a slinky going back and forth on the ground. If that slinky matches the space in which the body wants to exist at naturally, then it's naturally going to open up. And if we want to bring this back around to society, our speech is very important. It's the basis of everything. But when we speak, we don't often have we don't often portray ourselves in the best light. We don't speak to the best of our ability. Now that's totally okay. I'm not saying any one person or any one group is any better than the rest. In fact, I do believe all of us are trying to strive for the best, despite what others think and despite what others do. We're always looking out for our best. We're always trying to be positive. But when we see ourselves in a negative light, what happens is our body changes polarity. So when you have a wound on your body, a cut, a scrape, a chunk of flesh missing what has to regrow, what you'll find is that on either side of the wound, you'll have a reversal of polarity. And when you have that reversal, the wound heals much quicker because the body needs energy in order to function, in order to do things. Just as our electric grid in society powers up so many things, like a light bulb or a pump that gives you water in an entire city. And with that pump example, that leads us back to the spinal column. So it is said in many great texts that once you achieve a certain state of consciousness and a certain state of physical stature, your spine all of a sudden becomes an amplifier that will project you into the crown chakra, or as others say, it will allow you to see the entire universe. And the reason we say that is because now you have a toroid around your entire body. That magnetic field you now control. So that's going back to our steel example, where we had small eddy currents that made it so when we pass electric fields through it, it gets hot. That's why we don't have motors that can just take infinite heat. We have superconductors that can kind of do that, but that's a story for a different day. So when we have this toroid around our body, we're in full control of it. We can do what we want. And that can project ourselves into many different areas of the world, like schizophrenia. But that's a topic for another day. So what influences our own toroid, our own chakras? Well, our surroundings do. Say you live in a place that is completely full of steel and has just a very uniform and low charge to it. So a city is naturally going to have a lower potential energy because we have all of this steel, all of this copper, all of these giant eddy currents that govern the frequency aspect of our surroundings. Now, let's take a look at some sacred spaces, some temples, some mosques. Say the biggest one, the Great Pyramid of Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Egypt has many different properties. one of which is that seeds will grow inside of it far better than they would if you brought them outside to a greenhouse. And one of the things that the Great Pyramids do is they amplify a lot because of their shape, because of their position on Earth, because there's a water source underneath it that connects it to the geomagnetic grid very strongly, and the fact that you have an insulator, a sand, all around it that keeps the charge and funnels it into that. And that brings us to Earth grids and back to the sun. So with every complex object, you're going to have various places where magnetic fields, charges, electrons, molecules will want to flow. And with magnetic fields, they flow pretty darn easily throughout the entire universe. There's a few things that can isolate them very well, but for the most part, magnetic fields travel incredibly far. And so you could go to very far places. With that, I'll see you in the comments below. I'm curious what you all have to think, say, and want to do. So thank you for watching, and have a good day.